Hello everyone. Welcome back to my BNB Today spoiler channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Finn had run out of ways to convince himself that things with Steffy could still be repaired. He knew exactly where he'd gone wrong. He'd let Sheila Carter stay too close to his life for too long. And no matter how many promises he made now, Steffy had reached the point where promises alone weren't enough anymore. Ridge wasn't making it any easier. For him, this had stopped being about Sheila. It was about Finn failing to protect Steffy when she needed him most. Ridge made it clear that being her husband meant drawing a hard line, and Finn hadn't drawn it soon enough. Finn knew Ridge was right. What Finn didn't know was that Steffy was carrying a secret of her own, one that could destroy their marriage even faster than Sheila ever could. At Forrester Creations, Steffy found herself alone with Carter Walton after another exhausting confrontation. Carter had his own disaster to deal with. Daphne had walked out on their marriage, and he was trying to convince himself he could just move forward. Steffy understood that kind of pain. Both of them were married to people they still loved, and both marriages had become buried in disappointment and exhaustion. That shared pain created something dangerous. Neither of them planned for anything to happen. It started with one conversation, then another. They talked about feeling misunderstood, about how tiring it was to constantly pretend everything was fine. And somewhere in those conversations, the distance between them disappeared. The next morning, reality hit hard. Steffy looked at Carter, realizing one impulsive night had just changed everything. Carter felt it too. "This can never get out," he said quietly. Steffy didn't answer right away, because she knew the real problem wasn't whether they could keep it secret. It was whether they could live with it. Meanwhile, Finn was getting ready to do exactly what he thought Steffy had been waiting for, prove that Sheila would finally have no place in their marriage. He had no idea Steffy had already crossed a line of her own. Then came the complication nobody saw coming. Daphne came back. A sudden change of heart about Paris gave Carter exactly what he thought he wanted to hear. She was willing to try again. It should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like a weight pressing on his chest, because now there was something he could never tell her. Will, Dylan, and the fallout. Across town, Logan Spencer was growing suspicious of Dylan. She'd accepted her at first, based on everything Dylan had done for the family in the past. But now that Dylan was dating Will, Katie's protective instincts had kicked into overdrive. She pressed Will about how serious things had gotten, reminding him that Electra had meant a lot to him not long ago, and suggesting he might be making decisions on raw emotion. Will pushed back. Electra had told him flat out they were finished. He wasn't going to keep chasing someone who didn't want him. But Katie wasn't satisfied. She was convinced Dylan was hiding something, and she meant to find out what. At Forrester Creations, Electra made her own feelings clear, confronting Dylan directly and warning her that dating Will didn't give her the right to interfere in everyone else's lives. Dylan refused to back down. When Electra threatened to convince Steffy and Ridge to push her out of Forrester Creations altogether, Dylan realized this wasn't a rivalry anymore. It was a war. That war spilled into the open later at Bikini Bar. Will and Dylan were finally getting a moment alone when RJ and Electra walked in, and suddenly nobody could pretend the past was settled. The moment Electra saw Will sitting with Dylan, she stopped cold. RJ knew that look. She wasn't just surprised, she was hurt and angry and trying hard not to let either one take over. Will saw her too. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Then Electra broke the silence. "So, this is what you've been doing?" Will didn't get defensive. He reminded her that she was the one who ended things, and he'd respected that and tried to move on. That only made her angrier. She accused him of moving on too fast. Dylan stepped in, telling Electra she couldn't keep treating Will like he still belonged to her. RJ tried to cool things down, but Electra wasn't having it. Finally Will told her she couldn't reject him and then be angry that he stopped waiting. That landed harder than anything else said. Electra didn't respond. She just walked away, with RJ following behind. But the damage was done. Business and betrayal collide. Back at Forrester Creations, RJ pitched an idea for Electra's future. The face of a new, youth-focused fashion line, something that could pull in a younger audience. Zend liked the concept. For once, a conversation that wasn't about betrayal or heartbreak. But there was a catch. Electra's public feud with Dylan was already coloring how people saw her. Steffy and Ridge both noticed it. If she wanted the line approved, She'd have to prove she could keep business separate from personal revenge. Meanwhile, Steffy was facing a much bigger problem of her own. Finn came to make peace, admitting his mistakes with Sheila had cost her trust and promising Sheila would never again come between them. He thought her silence meant he was finally getting through to her. He had no idea it came from guilt. There were moments Steffy almost told him everything. But every time she looked at him, she imagined what would happen if he found out, and the fear stopped her cold. Finn read her silence as a sign she still cared, and told her he was willing to fight for their marriage. Steffy finally told him forgiveness wasn't something she could give instantly. She needed time. Finn agreed to wait, and left believing there was still hope. Alone again, Steffy's thoughts drifted straight back to Carter. Later, Carter and Steffy met privately. Neither wanted to talk about what had happened between them, but avoiding it only made the tension worse. Carter admitted Daphne's return had changed everything. She wanted to rebuild their marriage. Steffy asked if he was going to give her that chance. He couldn't answer, because there wasn't an easy one. He loved Daphne. He also couldn't undo what had happened with Steffy. For the first time, Carter understood that keeping a secret could get more complicated than telling the truth. Then Steffy got a message from Finn. He wanted to see her again. She stared at her phone. Carter watched her, and neither said a word. The secret was now standing squarely between them and everyone they loved. At the same time, Katie kept digging into Dylan's past, not chasing rumors, but facts. Where she'd come from, who she knew before LA, why she revealed so little about her own life. The more Katie dug, the more uneasy she got. Will thought his mother was being unfair. Katie believed she was protecting her son. Neither one budged. Then Katie found something that stopped her cold, gaps in Dylan's story. Not proof of anything dangerous, but enough to make her wonder what was being hidden. Katie decided she needed to meet the one person who knew Dylan better than anyone. Her mother, Darcy. Until now, Dylan had controlled every version of her own story. What Will knew, what Electra knew, what the Forresters believed. But a mother from the past could unravel all of that in a single conversation. Katie knew confronting Dylan directly would only make Will defend her harder, so she waited. Dylan could feel something was off. When Will asked what was wrong, she brushed it aside, saying she was tired of being judged for her past. He reassured her that he cared about who she was now, words that meant more to her than he realized, because there were still things about her past she wasn't ready to discuss. Pressure from every direction. Back at Forrester Creations, Electra faced her own test. She insisted her conflict with Dylan wouldn't bleed into her work, but everyone could see how raw the situation had become. Steffy warned her to be careful. If Electra wanted to succeed, she couldn't let Dylan control her future. Then Electra heard that Dylan and Will were growing closer, and every old wound reopened. Instead of confronting Will, she went straight at Dylan again. This time Dylan wouldn't be intimidated, telling Electra she was tired of being treated like an outsider. Electra reminded her that Will had once loved her. Dylan shot back that love wasn't something you got to own. The argument escalated until RJ had to physically step between them, neither woman backing down an inch. Elsewhere, Carter faced an impossible conversation of his own. Daphne wanted to forget Paris, forget the separation, and rebuild. Carter agreed to talk, but every trusting word out of her mouth made him feel worse. He'd always seen himself as someone who could fix broken things. Now he was trapped inside a mess of his own making, and he knew that if Daphne ever learned the truth about Steffy, both marriages could collapse. Carter met with Steffy again and told her Daphne wanted to reconcile. She said that was good news, but he could hear the doubt in her voice. When he asked if she regretted what happened between them, she didn't answer directly. She admitted she regretted hurting Finn, but couldn't deny that Carter had been there when she felt completely alone. That confession changed everything between them. This was no longer just about one night. There was a real emotional connection now, which made the secret even more dangerous. Finn, still believing his marriage could be saved, grew more determined to prove Sheila was finally out of the picture. He had no idea the real threat wasn't Sheila at all. It was the secret Steffy was carrying. And hanging over the younger generation was one more danger nobody wanted to name out loud. Will's motorcycle, and the reckless mood he'd been riding around in ever since he got caught between Dylan and Electra. Dylan worried about him. Katie worried about him. Even Electra, despite everything, still cared. An accident has a way of forcing people to say the things they've been avoiding, and Will's situation was getting more volatile by the day. Katie was preparing to confront Dylan's mother. Daphne was preparing to rebuild her marriage. Finn was preparing to fight for Steffy. Carter was preparing to hide a betrayal. And Steffy was starting to understand that secrets don't stay buried forever. Soon, someone would have to pay the price. By the time Darcy Dillon entered the picture, Katie's suspicions were impossible to ignore. She wasn't trying to humiliate Dillon, she wanted to know if her son was being played. But Darcy's arrival promised something more dangerous than answers: history. Dillon had built a whole new life in Los Angeles, but her mother knew exactly who she'd been before she got there, which meant every secret Dillon had dodged could suddenly be back on the table. Katie and Darcy were never going to be friends. Both were fiercely protective, both certain they were fighting for their child, and both convinced the other woman didn't understand the full picture. If Katie accused Dillon of using Will, Darcy would take it personally, and the confrontation could get explosive. Caught in the middle of all of it was Will, exhausted from everyone telling him who to love. Katie wanted him back with Electra. Electra wanted him to remember what they'd had. Dillon wanted his trust. All Will wanted was the freedom to choose for himself, but his choices kept getting more complicated, and the possibility of a crash still loomed over everything. If Will went down, Dillon would have to face how much she actually cared, Electra would have to face the feelings she'd been burying, and Katie would have to accept that protecting Will couldn't stop him from making his own dangerous choices. A secret with nowhere to go. Steffy's guilt was becoming unbearable. Every time Finn talked about their future and rebuilding trust, it made her feel worse, not better, because she knew she was hiding something that could destroy the very future he was fighting for. Carter felt the same pressure from the other direction. Daphne was giving him a second chance, and the guilt of what he wasn't telling her was becoming impossible to carry. Steffy started to consider telling someone. But who? Not Finn, not yet. Not Daphne. Not Ridge. The one person she could maybe trust was Taylor, who had always understood her emotional struggles better than almost anyone. But Taylor was also Finn's mother, and the moment Steffy told her, the secret would stop being only hers. Carter, meanwhile, could see the damage the secret was doing to everyone around him. He wanted to save his marriage, protect Steffy, and pretend that night had never happened, but reality wasn't cooperating. Daphne sensed the distance in him and asked outright if there was someone else. Carter froze. For one terrifying moment it looked like the truth might slip out, but he managed to dodge the question. Daphne didn't believe him, and that doubt wasn't going away on its own. Back at Forrester Creations, RJ's youthline pitch for Electra finally started gaining real traction. It was a genuine opportunity, but if she let her rivalry with Dillon consume her, she could lose it. RJ warned her she had to choose: keep fighting for Will, or fight for her future. Electra insisted she could do both. RJ wasn't convinced. Everyone is running out of time. The younger generation had entered a collision course of romance, loyalty, ambition, and jealousy, and the adults weren't any safer. Finn believed he was saving his marriage. Steffy was hiding a betrayal. Carter was trapped between guilt and desire. Daphne believed she was getting her husband back. Katie believed Dillon was hiding something. Darcy was arriving with answers. And Will stood at the center of it all, a growing storm nobody could contain. The real question wasn't who would end up with whom anymore. It was who would be exposed first. If Steffy's secret came out, Finn could lose the woman he'd been fighting to win back. If Carter's betrayal became public, Daphne could walk away for good. If Katie's digging uncovered something damaging about Dillon, Will's new relationship could collapse overnight. And if that motorcycle accident finally happened, every rivalry in town would suddenly feel insignificant next to the fear of losing him. That's what makes the next chapter so explosive. Everyone thinks they still have time. Finn thinks he can repair his marriage. Steffy thinks she can bury her mistake. Carter thinks he can protect Daphne from the truth. Katie thinks she can protect Will by exposing Dillon. Dillon thinks her past can stay behind her. Electra thinks she can win back control of her own life. But secrets have a way of choosing their own moment to explode, and when that moment comes, the people who believed they were still in control may find out the biggest betrayal was happening right in front of them all along.